What is going on, YouTube? I'm Brandon. You're back in the Geel Strap Garage. Today we're getting ready to install a Sputhe stabilizer. If you're only interested in the stabilizer installation, go down to the timestamp below. If you want the bike updates from the little series that I've been working on here, then let's show you guys what's been going on. I've got the bike pretty well torn down right now. I'll explain why everything's torn down so far on the back after I get into the stabilizer installation. But I've got the exhaust off, the exhaust bracket off. I knew that I had a small crack. I didn't realize the severity. Let me grab, I think I got a flashlight in my bag, in a little bag that I take back and forth between home and work. You see that crack there? It's pretty gnarly right there. Watch when I put the light back on it. So I've got Boosted Brad's unbreakable thunderheader bracket. That's going to be excellent for not having to worry about ruining a $1,000 exhaust, a $900 exhaust. Let's see, what else do I got going on? I still have not finished wiring in my ignition. I've got all of my electrical ran up to the front. I've got some pretty nice sheathing over it. At least I think it looks nice. It's going to be my fuel pump. This is for the heads-up display. I've still got to wire in my headlights, and I've got to wire in my my supply for my new phone charger. All that's coming. There's a reason I'm kind of bouncing around on what I'm doing here and why I'm not just finishing up the bar installation. My little workflow, so I could have finished up the electrical, put all the bars and everything together, and then started working on, you know, just piece by piece. But here's the deal. I've got the back torn apart right now because I've got tires for my bike and for Allie's bike. I've got everything I need to do my front suspension. So as soon as I wrap up this stabilizer installation, I'm going to start tearing down the front end. The triple trees are coming off because I've got new neck bearings. The front end's being rebuilt. I'm going to, when I install my race tech setup, I'm going to pull my progressive drop-in springs out of this bike, and I'm going to put them in Allie's bike. So she's got a little bit stiffer spring in her bike. And there's a lot of back and forth that's going on right here. But the big thing right now is tires. While I have the tires off, it's a perfect opportunity to make a detailed installation video for the Sputhe stabilizer because everything's gonna be out of the way in the back. So before we get into the Sputhe installation, we're gonna recap a little bit here. I'm gonna get these stabilizers installed. I'm gonna tear down the front of the bike. I'm gonna do my front suspension. And then I'm going to, after the front end is back on, I'm going to finally finish up my wiring, run all the wires through the bars and everything like I have to, because all that's going to get, you know, basically taken off when I do the front suspension. And I think we'll finally be down to it. I've got a little bit of a parts cart here. So in here, I have my powder coated fork lowers. I've got my gauge or my delete covers or caps. My fork tubes are in here. My fork seals are here. My new throttle cable for the handlebar control delete is there. I've got my new exhaust gaskets here. I've got Allie's clutch gaskets. I've got everything to do an oil change down below. And we're finally getting through it. I still have so much work to do, but I mean, it's really not that bad. So now I'm going to kind of readjust here and we're going to get into the stabilizer installation. There are a couple things to note. One, it is recommended to use new motor mounts when you are installing the stabilizers. These motor mounts are only about a year old. I've got about, if I'm remembering when I did them correctly, I've got about 8,000 miles on them. Not a whole lot. No need to replace them yet. So I've done a Sputhe installation video before. It's done pretty well over the last 3 or 4 years. But I'm going to go through line by line, one by one on the instructions and show you exactly what these instructions are telling you. I've reached out to Sputhe because I love their product, and I'm kind of a small guy to be getting deals like this, but they basically want nothing to do with the partnership. But I like the product so much, I'm excited to finally have one on a bike of my own that I'm gonna make a standalone video, very detailed instruction video, and we're gonna get into it. The front is very easy to install. The rear is where it gets a little bit tricky, and it's always extremely hard to show on camera. So I'm kind of glad that I have the bike torn down to this level. I have it chalked up on wood, so you guys could basically see, pretend the wood is the tire on the swing arm on the ground. I'm gonna use my flat jack, my little pancake jack here to lift up and support the engine as I come up and down. But I've always fought the rear, doing motor mounts, doing these Sputhe stabilizers. I have installed these with the back tire installed. I've installed them with the back tire off. Basically, keeping your engine or keeping your drivetrain from rolling one way or the other is really the big trick here. If it rolls on you, you fight quite a bit getting it lined back up. But that's really, that roll in the Dyna chassis is what you're eliminating with this Sputhe stabilizer. So I'm gonna set you guys close up to the front here, and I'm gonna get some good lighting, and we're gonna get real down and dirty step by step, 1 through 13 on the installation. I was hoping to start with the rear, but the instructions don't start with the rear. So we're gonna do the front, run through it, set up in the back, and with the time of day that it is, I worked like 12 hours today. If I don't get to the rear today, we'll just do it tomorrow. No big deal. Here we go. So I've got it laid out here what we need to start. This is everything that came in the kit here on my little bolster pad. We need a 1/2-inch wrench, a 9/16 wrench. Actually, we might need a 7/16. Yes, sorry, 7/16 wrench. A 7/16 socket. Those are for the jam nuts. I've got an assortment of sockets: 7/16, 1/2-inch, and 9/16. I've got a couple different size extensions. I've got a 5/16 Allen socket, and I've got a 3/16 Allen socket. I've got a few different ratchet selections. First things first, I'm gonna just I got a little wood block on my jack here. I'm just gonna relieve a little bit of that tension. You can see as I move the jack, the front isolator moves a little bit. If you're lifting your front suspension up, you're going too high. Just try to find a midpoint in that isolator. And now we're gonna do just like the instructions say and break these 2 nuts loose. And I've ran into it before where this step is one of those easier said than done things, because when it comes time to take this bolt out, it actually hits the frame. And after it hits the frame, you've got to pull the isolator mount. One more very important thing I forgot to add to the table here is the service book. I'm gonna have that set out so when it's time to start getting stuff back together, we know our torque specs. Step 2 is remove one of the old bolts and replace it with the 2 3/4-inch socket head bolts and lock washers provided. All right, so we're gonna remove our first bolt. Now we're going to take this bracket assembly here. It's got 2 bolts in it. We're going to take one of these bolts out. Now I'm going to do myself a favor with the installation. Put a little bit of anti-seize on the collar of this. On the shoulder of the bolt, I should say. And we're going to fight to wiggle this guy in. Let's see, this is... Okay, we're going this way. The instructions clearly state that the posi-track assembly is symmetrical, so the bolts can go in from either side. Replace the other original bolt, which is this one here. And install the anodized aluminum bracket. A little bit of anti-seize on the collar, not to get it on the threads where I'm going to be using Loctite. So I'm going to take my Loctite and get a little dab here. This is going to be the tricky part because this motor mount's spread pretty far right now. So getting a couple good threads to engage might be, oh no, it's not too bad. I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a chore than that. All right, a little bit of a specialty tool here. I have a Matco 5/16 impact set and my small little snap-on driver here. So now it calls out, remove the lower bolt attaching the isolator to the frame. So we're going to put a little Loctite on our bolt. We're going to position our bracket just like that. I'm going to get this snug, but not tight. Nah, not even snug. Enough to be able to spin the bracket around still. Now we're going to take our top bolt loose, step number 6, remove the original upper frame to isolator bolt. Take our new bolt, apply our Loctite. Now we're going to swing it up into place. So that was step 7. Swing the frame bracket into position, install the other socket head bolt and lock washer. Attach the stainless steel stabilizer link to the aluminum bracket with the bolt provided in the following sequence: AN washer, dust seal, bearing, dust seal, bracket. So as you can see, we've got that on this end here. There's our washer, dust seal, bearing, dust seal, and then the bracket. But what I'm going to do a little bit extra is in this bearing here, I'm going to apply just a little bit of grease in there. Keep it from grinding. It's not really going to be rotating much, if at all. Now that I've got some grease in there, we're going to clean this up. Make sure to wipe any grease off of the threads before we apply our Loctite. Now step 9, adjust the stabilizer length so that the bolt hole in the frame bracket and the link bearing are in alignment. Loosen this up a bit so I can spin it. Now you can see, for it to sit straight, the link is going to sit behind this bracket. And we're just going to take this nut in the center here and spin it out until we're in alignment. We can check our alignment here with the bolt. Went a little far. Okay, that's perfect. Attach the bolt in the following sequence. We're going to have on our bolt here the AN washer, then the bracket, then the dust seal, then the bearing, then the dust seal, then the AN washer, and then the nylock nut. And nothing is really, actually nothing is at all tight yet. Now it says to tighten the jam nuts, which we're gonna get a little Loctite in here, a little Loctite in here. Get these close. But before we do anything, we're gonna get torqued down. Oh, my light died. I'm sorry, we just got a few bolts here to do. We've got 22 to 27 foot-pounds on the lower bolts. And 18 to 22 on the uppers. That's gonna be a problem because this nut is in the way. And this one's gonna be extremely difficult to get torque on. Not really ideal to torque with a ball end Allen, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Just getting these nuts, or getting these bolts tightened up here. I'm gonna go to 23 on these. I just don't want to blow out that aluminum. Now I want to keep my bearings here pretty centered. Pretty well centered. Get that nice and tight. Get that nice and tight. And that front isolator is locked down. And that was step number 11 there, to tighten the jam nuts. The next step is onto the rear. I think I've had about enough fun for the day. The rear is quite the chore. I'm going to charge up my lights. Let's get you guys a good image on what's happening here. But yeah, I'm gonna make sure everything's charged up. We're gonna start fresh tomorrow. All right, picking up where we left off. It's actually 2 days later because we were storm prepping yesterday, but we're gonna get into it here. Having the rear off, like I believe I already discussed, is gonna give us a lot greater visibility on what we're working with here, and possibly even a little bit easier access. So we can see, oh, these are going to be our two mounting bolts, and then just like the front mount, there's kind of tucked, yep, you can see them right there. Those are going to be nuts right here on the left side of the bike that we are going to have to remove, and hopefully we can do this without rolling the engine. If we follow it just like the manufacturer says in the instructions, I think we can do it. I think these instructions are designed to be able to do it without even supporting the engine or the drivetrain, but I wouldn't try it. That's just me. So part B, step 1, remove the rear wheel for better access. Depending on the year of the model, motorcycle, it may be necessary to remove part of the exhaust system and move the rear master cylinder out of the way, which the tire is off, the exhaust bracket's off. The master cylinder on this bike, I don't think is going to interfere. I can get to the two heads of the bolts that are right there without pulling this master cylinder. I believe 06 and up, I know on my 2017, and I think I've done a 2015 model, when you break this nut loose, there's actually a slot cut here in the mounting position for the master cylinder. You just break the nut loose and you can walk the thing out of the way. But like I said, I think I can get to those nuts and bolts with no issue. Step 2. Remove one of the bolts attaching the rear isolator to the transmission. So I believe how we're going to do this, I'll show from this side. I've got an impact wrench kind of just hanging out right here, and it's ready to loosen. I've got a very short extension, wobbly at that, and another 9/16 socket. I'm going to put on the same bolt on the other side. I'm going to hold this on here. We'll hold this on here. There's the nut. I'm going to attempt to pull that front bolt. See if I keep hammering on it with the impact. It's already walking out a little bit, if it'll just come out for me. Just like that, that bolt is out. Now it says to install one of the 3-inch hex head bolts and lock washer provided from the left side. So I'm going to do the same thing. Get a little bit of anti-seize on the shoulder of this bolt. Just a little bit. And we're now going to install this from the left side. Such a tight space. My light fell, but I'm honestly doing this kind of blind. Okay, that bolt is installed. Now, step 4, repeat with the other bolt and attach the cast steel transmission bracket. Ooh, like butter. Now, I believe it makes sense when you're installing it. You can see there's really not a lot of options on how to mount it, but the tabs are going to face towards the top of the bike. They're going to go up. Routing this stuff, you have to start paying attention to your wire harness and things like that. Oh, master cylinder might be in the way. All right, I think that is enough out of the way. Now that the master cylinder is out of the way, we're going to be getting our bracket right on the 2 bolts there. And I've only got one shot. Get a little blue Loctite. I'm going to put it on the thread side here, just because it's going to be a little bit easier. A couple little dabs in there. That'll do. It's such a tight area, but you can kind of see down in there, in between all the grime and everything. There is our transmission. There's the ear of our mount. That little shiny piece in between is our bolt. And then the new piece over to the right is the bracket that we're threading into it. So, as I'm installing it, I'm kind of reaching in on this side, getting my hand on the head of that bolt, spinning it, and I got my thread started. You know, holding that. So using my left hand, trying to shore up this side, using my right hand to perfectly position this bracket here, which I've got a couple threads started now. I'm going to get a few more threads started on the back bolt because that one spins a little bit more freely than the front. And then I'll start working on getting my position for the front locked into place. This is the side where the battery ratchet will come into play. So I still got that pretty loose there. I'm gonna try to go for the front and see if it'll lock in. I see it dancing all over the place. What do we need? I need to push out on it a little bit. There it is. Now we're gonna get a torque wrench on this just so we're done with torquing on that part of it and we can move on to the back. So because this is a fine thread bolt, I double checked the torque spec for what a 3/8 fine thread bolt would be, like a generic torque spec instead of the book. It's still pretty par for the course. Fine thread, which the range they're giving me on this chart is pretty wide, 15 to 26 foot-pounds for fine thread. We're still gonna go like the book calls. I'm gonna put it right at 23, and that'll meet kind of the middle of the range there. Now, step number 5, remove the lower isolator to frame bolt. Install the 1.5" set screw. You know what, I'm gonna want to give myself enough thread on this to make it through the housing on here and still be able to get it to slide out. That should, you know, I'm gonna go back a couple, I don't know, I feel good with it right there. Now, remove the upper isolator to frame bolt. Using the socket head bolt and the lock washer provided in the upper hole, attach the cast steel frame bracket. I've got my bolt in the top here, no bolt in the bottom. We're going to be mindful of our electrical. I've got all the zip ties cut. The harness is moving pretty freely now. Now that it's moving freely, I'm gonna make sure it sits in a position that I like before I bind anything up or finish securing anything. We'll finish tightening up the bracket and see how it needs to fall into place. Got my Loctite on my bolts here. I'm gonna use my little palm ratchet here. I like to feel those threads start. Make sure I'm not real boogered up on anything. And now we're going to take out our set screw, which is coming right out. So that's it. Remove the set screw and install the other socket head bolt and washer for step 9. So I'm going to set these to about 25. Just like the book calls for. That's about the middle of the torque range. Now, step number 10 is snug the 1/4" screws against the frame and tighten the jam nuts. So these here, gotta get a 7/16" wrench. All right, that helps a lot with the rigidity. I hope that wasn't angled up too high the whole time. That helps a lot with that rigidity up against the frame there. Like this side's a little hard to see. Got some Loctite, got the jam nuts set. Now the next part is going to be setting our little brace in here. Repeat this procedure used on the front stabilizer link for the rear stabilizer link. So the link is going to go on the bottom side of everything. So I'm just getting the one side brought up. And now, alright, that wire is going to pinch a little bit. So step 12, it says on some models it may be necessary to move and zip tie the wiring bundle. Number 13, on some models it's necessary to turn the brake banjo fitting. So we'll know quick when we start riding if we pinched it, because, well, it's just going to short out. Oh yeah, that's good. Okay, I got it right out of the way. So I'm going to leave that disconnected for now. I may have to do something very different for the brake switch. I'm going to finish tightening these link bolts up. Same thing, it's a 3/8 fine thread bolt. I'm going to torque down to 23 foot-pounds, that is. A little bit of Loctite. So again, I want to keep these fisheye bearings pretty centered. 2 9/16 wrenches. And ta-da, that's it. Now what I'm thinking here for this fitting, if I go to bolt up and keep the fitting locked into place, my brake switch is going to hit the stabilizer link. So if I just get like a 45 or a 90, all that is 1/8 inch NPT for the brake switch. I can likely just angle it out this way or that way a little bit, depending on what works better, the 45 or the 90. And then I can snake in my wires through behind the master cylinder, bring them right out, and plug them in just right behind it. So it might work out pretty good. Other than that, I have to tie up all my wiring, bleed my brakes, and then do everything else. So if you guys are watching this in the series, stay tuned for it. I definitely still have my work cut out for me. The weather's up and down. The good days are coming. I'm not worried about it yet. But if you're just here because you're trying to get rid of that Dyna Wobble, let me tell you, this is one of the best things you can do. You won't regret it. It's worth the money, I promise. Thank you guys for following along. I hope the vision I had in my head for this video made it to you guys. If you found it helpful, some engagement with the channel would be awesome. Some engagement on the Patreon or picking up some merch is even better. But no matter how you show your appreciation, thank you, I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next video.